Known for its psychological horror, iconic and oppressive fog, twisted enemy and boss designs, and its deeply unnerving settings, Silent Hill has been scaring gamers across decades of titles, spanning numerous console generations, from its popular mainline entries to its lesser-known obscure spin-off titles. Above all, Silent Hill is perhaps best known as being one of the scariest game franchises of all time, with well-known abominations like the imposing Pyramid Head and the eponymous town of Silent Hill itself being synonymous not only within the video game medium, but also in film and television. Silent Hill is a household name for those even slightly versed with horror, and with new titles like Silent Hill 2 Remake and Silent Hill F generating a renewed interest in this once stagnant series, I thought now is as good a time as ever to dive deep into Silent Hill, ranking each game based on how scary they are. From the well-received older numbered Silent Hill titles made by Team Silent to the highly contentious titles that surfaced afterward, we are diving into every single mainline Silent Hill game with the focus of narrowing down from a heap of just over a half dozen games, which of the bunch truly earns the distinction of being the scariest Silent Hill game of all time. We did this a few years ago with the Resident Evil franchise, of which you can view linked in the description, and this year, it's Silent Hill's turn to take the spotlight. So ready your flashlights, turn on your radios, and curb stomp the light out of that like button as we venture through the fog of Silent Hill to unearth the horrors that befall us. As this is a ranking of my own thoughts, feel free to share your list and opinions in the comments, as we all interpret horror and fear differently. Before we get into the main Silent Hill games, I'd be remiss to say that there are plenty of Silent Hill spin-off entries that are quite obscure. If you've played any of these spin-off titles, let us know in the comments and whether you enjoyed them. But let's entertain these few spin-off games before we jump into the list proper, shall we? We've got Silent Hill the Arcade, an arcade on-rails shooter that hit machines in 2007, which interestingly featured its own unique storyline. While I never played this one, I hear it's quite good, featuring a greatest hits of Silent Hill enemies and environments. On a lower note, we have 2012's PS Vita exclusive Silent Hill Book of Memories, a game that can be played by up to 4 players featuring elements from role-playing games with an isometric camera angle. This one was poorly received, criticized for being too much of a departure from the typical Silent Hill format, introducing uninteresting zones to traverse with enemies to be hacked through. Its complete lack of tension and scares is notable here, but because I never played this one myself, sound off in the comments if you happen to like this game for what it was. Silent Hill The Escape is a first-person shooter mobile game that featured dungeon crawling gameplay but suffered from technical issues and featured no real scares to its gameplay. Play novel Silent Hill was a visual novel retelling the story of Silent Hill 1 for the Game Boy Advance, where players would make certain dialogue decisions that would shape how the story and its endings would unfold. 2024 saw Silent Hill The Short Message, a free downloadable game that prioritized a short story and themes over engaging and scary gameplay. Finally, there were 3 Silent Hill orphan games that essentially were point-and-click adventure games for mobile that featured the setting of Silent Hill, emphasizing the series' staple exploration and puzzle-solving gameplay. Sound off in the comments which of these spin-offs you played and what you thought of them, as I never got my hands on any of these titles over the years. Were they scary? Should they be revisited? Let us all know in the comments, but before we get to the list proper, we gotta address perhaps the scariest game in the series that never saw the light of day, PT. A game from Konami helmed by legendary game director Hideo Kojima and renowned film director Guillermo del Toro, this playable teaser for what would have been Silent Hills put players in a first-person perspective, tasked with roaming around a suburban house corridor that would perpetually loop upon passing through the door at the end of the corridor. With each loop altering the hallways and its small side rooms, cryptic puzzles and story elements would be fed to the player, with each one increasing the danger of a hostile ghost Lisa spawning to hunt the player down. The sound design, attention to detail, lighting, and sheer dread introduced in PT was unlike anything we had ever seen back in 2014 when it debuted on the PlayStation Store, and even now, its legacy has influenced modern horror games to great effect, including Resident Evil 7, often considered to be the scariest game of that franchise. Serving as Konami's attempt to bring Silent Hill to the forefront of the horror genre in the mid-2010s, now the cancellation of PT has gone down as one of the most disappointing cancellations of a video game in the history of the medium. With the game being taken off the PlayStation Store back in 2015, PS4 players who still have the game loaded in their hard drives are really the only ones able to relive this exceptional title that turned into an overnight phenomenon. Thankfully, I happen to be one of those who still have access to the game. Hopefully, one day we will see a collaboration as epic as Kojima and Del Toro with a horror project like this, but for now, PT's legacy represents what the Silent Hill franchise could have been in the 2010s. A reinvigorated, re-energized franchise that was growing stagnant, re-emerging onto the scene to scare us all with what would have likely been the scariest video game ever made. While I won't be ranking PT in this video, it's worth mentioning its lasting impact on the industry and how close Silent Hill was to receiving the shot in the arm that it so greatly needed. With the recent successes like Silent Hill 2 Remake and now 2025's Silent Hill F being the fastest selling game in franchise history, it's safe to say that Silent Hill is now finding its stride, but Silent Hills in PT will never be forgotten for its contribution to the horror medium. Sound off in the comments what your thoughts on PT are. And now, on to the ranking of the mainline Silent Hill games, as we rank all the main games in the series, starting with its least scary to the scariest Silent Hill game ever made. What many others and I believe to be the least scary mainline Silent Hill game is Silent Hill Homecoming. Released in 2008, this title was the first entry in the Silent Hill series to make its way onto the PS3 and Xbox 360, and yeah, not many were a fan of this Silent Hill game. This was also one of the Silent Hill games that wasn't developed by Team Silent or Konami, and was instead developed by a Western developer, in this case, Double Helix, and for whatever reason, the game never released in Japan. Alright, so while we're not going to talk too much about the quality of this game in this video, you'll see a pattern here in regards to these later Silent Hill games missing the mark on what made the earlier games so great, and per the angle of this video, the scares are really kept to a minimum here in Silent Hill Homecoming. This largely has to do with the protagonist Alex Shepard, who is a soldier, well-versed in utilizing any number of firearms with some proficiency in melee combat, and it is primarily this aspect that further reinforces why the earlier games worked so well, by thrusting the player into the role of an everyman, or everywoman, tasked with overcoming unimaginable scenarios where danger lurks around every corner. Well, in exchange for the harrowing and intimate combat that contributed to the horror so greatly in the earlier Silent Hill titles, Homecoming just loves to send tons and tons of enemies at you that are pleading to get copious rounds of shotgun blasts to the face. What really makes this all the more unfortunate is that the game decides to throw in iconic enemies and boss characters from past games. Like, seeing the first transition into the Otherworld is a genuinely cool moment, except that when your first monster you encounter is literally the bubblehead nurses from Silent Hill 2, it doesn't leave a great impression. Heck, Pyramid Head, one of, if not the most iconic enemy of the Silent Hill franchise, is thrown in the game for no reason whatsoever other than to serve as fan service. What made the other Silent Hill games so great were their enemy designs and their relationship to the protagonist, as these designs are meant to represent suppressed feelings and emotions that manifest into horrible monstrosities that the protagonist must confront. By shoehorning in these elements from other games for the sake of providing fan service demonstrates that the developers completely misunderstood the assignment here. Sometimes you will be accompanied by an NPC, many of whom are loaded with firepower, and you can simply mosey around while your companion takes care of all the enemies. While games like Resident Evil 4 in particular blended action and horror well, with Leon's arsenal of weapons and acrobatic ability befit of a badass government agent, here in Silent Hill Homecoming, the enemies love to mindlessly charge the player with an AI programmed to simply close the distance, and with the amount of firepower available at your disposal, there's no amount of creepy environments and atmosphere that will overwhelm you when your safety blanket is a confidence that, no matter the situation, your firearms will always get the job done. It is the decision to make this title decidedly more action-oriented and scaled back in the tension and atmosphere why I believe Homecoming to be not only one of the most disappointing Silent Hill games, but also the least scary title of the mainline franchise.
Something wrong, son? Afraid all the roads are out, every last one of them.
In line with Silent Hill Homecoming, we have 2012's Silent Hill Downpour for the PS3 and 360. This game was a freaking mess when it launched, thanks in part to its insane amount of performance issues, but has since been somewhat ironed out with patches. Thankfully, Downpour noticeably shifts away from the bombastic action of Homecoming, and more or less returns to many of the staples that made the Silent Hill franchise so great. Exploration was plentiful, the puzzles were inventive, and the overall ambiance here was decidedly bleaker when compared to Homecoming. Where the game truly succeeds in the scare department is in its subtle moments of fear and tension, with the hillside house being a great example of creating such tension. Accessible from a side window that leads to what appears to be a cluttered basement, we take protagonist Murphy Pendleton through an eerie set of atmospheric trials to understand what on earth is going on in this house. The distant weeping of a woman haunts the player as we try to ascertain what has been disturbing her, when all of a sudden, the cries are no more when we accidentally surge a TV. Now, we are the prey, as we mercilessly get hunted by this woman when we come across a firearm in a side room in the basement. These moments of tense atmosphere and excellent sound design are present throughout this title, and while the enemies and monster designs are really more funny looking than they are frightening, Silent Hill Downpour largely succeeds at harkening back to the older Silent Hill games and what made them so freaky to begin with. The nod to Silent Hill 4: The Room also stands to be one of the greatest Easter eggs yet in the entire series, so kudos to developer Vatra Games for including such a reference. It has genuinely great atmosphere and moments, and knows when to bump up the tension, but never quite hits the high marks the series established with the earlier Silent Hill titles.
We go back to the start. Understand what happened. Let's get started then.
While not a particularly scary game from the visceral and graphic sense of what horror games can be, our next game, Silent Hill: Shattered Memories, does a superb job at making this game genuinely frightening through its psychological thrills. Released in 2009 exclusively for the Wii, this game is honestly really impressive considering the hardware it was working with. You've got dynamic shadows, solid character models, and superbly detailed environments that really push the Wii's hardware to its max, and for the most part, the game is a blast to play through, and its psychological complexity will likely leave a lasting impression. Shattered Memories is a reimagining of the very first Silent Hill game, where the events of the first game play out quite differently this time around. Here, gameplay is a bit different. On one hand, you have the typical exploration we've come to know from past Silent Hill games, but unique to Shattered Memories is the therapy session gameplay we get with Dr. Kaufman. During regular intervals throughout the story, our shrink sessions task us with providing our own interpretations on what we perceive around us, related to the game's characters, areas, and the strangeness going on to the town of Silent Hill itself. And the decisions we make during these therapy sessions leave direct impacts on the story and the environments we explore, leading to a variety of permutations on how we can experience the game. Each character's appearances will alter depending on your choices, and also the dialogue you have with them, which is commendable considering this game's gameplay is entirely different from nearly every other entry in the series. It is here where Shattered Memories is a bit contentious regarding the game's scares, because, well, the game truly is not very scary. When ranked solely on visual horror and scary enemy designs and the like, I'd place this around Homecoming. but this game instead ends up being a pretty solid psychological thriller through its exploration gameplay. Using your phone to take photos of supernatural disturbances, calling numbers on documents that flesh out the backstory of characters, and dialing up the numbers of deceased individuals in this frozen hellscape of Silent Hill Shattered Memories' Otherworld, and piecing together the connections between what you're experiencing on screen and that of what you thought you knew happened in Silent Hill 1, culminates in a truly unique psychological thriller that will haunt you long after you put the game down. Sure, the lack of combat here and the annoying and not scary chase sequences are very underwhelming, but instead is a compelling and haunting psychological thriller that further fleshes out our understanding of Silent Hill 1 and its characters. The twist at the end of the game, of which I won't spoil here, is absolutely brilliant and plays to the strengths of what makes Silent Hill such a compelling franchise to begin with. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but give it a shot and you might come out both impressed and frightened by its thrilling narrative. And it's the haunting narrative and deeply psychological component here that gives this title the edge over the Silent Hill titles we previously went over. Silent Hill Origins marks the first game in the series that was not developed in-house by Team Silent and Konami, but was instead developed by Climax Studios, who also worked on Silent Hill Shattered Memories. Released on the PSP in 2007 and later ported to the PS2 in 2008, like its namesake, Origins serves as a prequel to the very first Silent Hill game. The game sees us in the role of trucker Travis Grady, where, while on the road, we nearly collide with a young girl. Sound familiar? Travis decides to go after the young girl as he abandons his truck on the road, eventually coming across a house engulfed in flames. Since it wouldn't be a Silent Hill game without ignoring imminent death and danger before us, we take Travis through the burning house until we finally reach the girl, now burnt to a crisp. As we take the toasted girl out of the house, we lose consciousness, and when we come to, we are greeted with the suffocating fog of Silent Hill. Origins takes us through a small slice of Silent Hill, from a hospital to an asylum and more, and while the game's runtime is quite short, it's purposefully so, as it was designed for short bursts of play on the PSP. Even so, Silent Hill Origins otherwise plays very similarly to the older games in the series, not surprising since it came a mere 3 years after Team Silent's last game, Silent Hill 4: The Room. While the atmosphere is indeed quite strong here in Origins, this game quickly finds itself rehashing enemies like the nurses from Silent Hill 2, which dampen the originality here and feels like fan service. Because Origins marked the first time a Silent Hill game was developed outside of Konami, it feels like the developers missed the point of what a Silent Hill game should be, as discussed when we went over Silent Hill Homecoming. The inclusion of enemies, particularly from Silent Hill 2 and Origins, doesn't make much sense here, as those enemies in Silent Hill 2 were a manifestation of James' suppressed thoughts and feelings, so why they never went far with Travis and exploring him and his psyche in greater detail was a greatly missed opportunity. That said, the thrills and scares of the earlier games are very much present here in Origins, albeit to a lesser degree, largely due to how empty some of the environments are, likely due to the PSP's limitations. Combat doesn't fare well here, as enemies can hilariously get stun-locked with ease, giving little urgency to these encounters, and while it's refreshing that the game decided to do something different by giving the player tons of different weapons to collect that have durability to encourage experimentation, your fists are as deadly as any weapon you'll find here, and coupled with the easy nature of stun-locking enemies into oblivion, the game can be easily exploited, which completely erases what would otherwise be tense encounters. While Silent Hill 4's combat was also admittedly quite easy and could be exploited, at least that game made up for it with its numerous apartment haunts and by having the unique gameplay with the ghosts. We'll get into that game later, but ultimately, Silent Hill Origins just doesn't have much of a lasting impact in terms of its story and its gameplay. The game ends up being more stale than most, and while it's great to see the characters from the original game here, there's little this game does with them that further develops them in Origins. Now, while it sounds like I don't have a lot of good things to say about this title, I commend the developers for making a competent Silent Hill game that could be experienced on the go. The graphics and presentation were excellent for the PSP, and while I had some issues with the game back in the day, all of which we went over here, the game still manages to be quite atmospheric and creepy. It's like playing a slightly watered down Silent Hill game from the early days, and while its story and gameplay are a bit underwhelming, it's got the feeling of classic Silent Hill, so give it a shot if you're curious to check out the very first game in the series not developed by Konami. Just missing the top 5, the OG Silent Hill is an incredible game, one that not only is obviously responsible for the rest of the series, but is still a great and terrifying game in its own right all these years later. Released on the PS1 in 1999, Harry Mason's story searching for his daughter in the frigid and haunting town of Silent Hill is a spook fest that is undeniably brilliant from start to finish, sporting impressively cinematic camera angles for its time, showering you with oppressive and dense fog that served double duty not only as a technical limitation of the PS1, but also as a story and thematic device. The game just oozes atmosphere and horror around every single one of its locations, from the haunting Midwich Elementary School and its creepy child monsters called the Demon Children that stalk its halls and classrooms, to the most unsettling amusement park that you never wanted to visit. Silent Hill 1 was perhaps the most unnerving game on the PS1. Having a DualShock controller elevated the tension here, as the controller would vibrate to simulate the heartbeat of Harry, intensifying as danger approached. This game is just pure immersion. The storyline was cryptic, diving deep into the town of Silent Hill's cultic history, and its characters like Dahlia Gillespie served as a truly frightening antagonist that left her mark on the town that reverberated across many of the Silent Hill games that preceded it. It was all state-of-the-art back then, and its graphical charm, while definitely outdated today, is a large reason why this game is still so haunting. The corroded and grimy hellscapes that are now synonymous with Silent Hill look as haunting and fantastic as many of its newer counterparts, and there is no denying that the opening gameplay section of leading Harry into that twisted alleyway in search of his daughter is one of the most intense ways to start a game. This windy pathway, covered in blood, begins to twist more and more, revealing around each turn Harry's descent into the other world, and at its end, we are left with facing this. A grim warning of what we are about to get into with Silent Hill. Upon trying to leave this messed up alleyway, we get overwhelmed by hordes of demon children. Did our daughter turn into one of these things, you may ask yourself? What was that bloody corpse we just saw at the end of the alleyway? Did we just die? Why am I waking up in this diner with an officer by my side? This section lays the foundation for all the intense encounters that are to come, not only in this game, but for the remainder of the series, and it is a game that any fan of horror should absolutely pick up. Interestingly, these enemies, the Demon Children, commonly encountered in the elementary school, are exclusive to the North American version of the game and do not appear in the European or Japanese versions. In their stead are the Mumblers in these other versions, as censors in Japan and in Europe deemed the appearance of the Demon Children were too similar to that of a child. Pretty creepy, am I right? The psychological pull here relating to the identity and disappearance of Harry's daughter is incredibly haunting, and it's all the more exciting that Konami and Bloober Team, the studio behind the incredible Silent Hill 2 remake, are partnering up yet again to remake this very game, the original that started it all. In just a couple years' time, we'll be able to re-experience this masterpiece with a fresh coat of paint and mechanics, and who knows? Could this remake jump up a few notches over the original in the scares department? Only time will tell. Alright, we are about to go over the last 5 games on this list, with one of them being a remake, another being an entirely new and original Silent Hill game in this year's Silent Hill F, and 3 of them being original games from Team Silent on the PS2. It's no doubt that the majority of the scariest games in the series all originated from the earlier games, as Team Silent had an expert understanding of how to create tension and dread both in its environment design and in its psychological pull. But just how well does 2025's Silent Hill F stand up to the horrors of some of the series' most celebrated games? If you're still with me and are excited to dive deeper into the very best and scariest titles Silent Hill has to offer, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you think is the scariest Silent Hill game. And with that, let's shift our focus to the top 5 scariest Silent Hill games ever made, according to yours truly. This year's Silent Hill F not only reflects a triumphant, high-quality title in its own right, but also a pretty haunting Silent Hill game that leaves its biggest impact in what Silent Hill does best: that brooding, sometimes suffocating psychological horror. I went back and forth with the rankings of Silent Hill F and the original Silent Hill, and while I found Silent Hill 1 to be the blueprint for how to do psychological horror right in video games, to me, Silent Hill F managed to rattle me a bit more with its presentation and themes. Again, how we perceive scares is entirely subjective and varies from person to person, so let me know in the comments how much you agree or disagree with its ranking here. But at the end of the day, Konami and developer Neobards have created one of the best and most haunting Silent Hill games yet in 2025's Silent Hill F. Starring 15-year-old Hinako Shimizu in the rural town of Ebisagaoka in 1960s Japan, a nation poised between recovery and reinvention from post-war uncertainty, protagonist Hinako emerges as a product of this era, as this profoundly important developmental period of her youth sees her grappling with who she wants to be amongst the hopes and desires of her parents and society around her. Hinako embodies a protest of authority, as we follow a descent through Hinako's own psyche that unfurls around every corner of the game. Bonds with her friends from school challenge her femininity, and even her own family, whose love feels indistinguishable from control, are but some of the growing pains Hinako is facing, as this descent into her psyche gives way to the town around her, dissolving into haunting hellscapes covered in blood and filth. Its new residents contorted in flower-covered flesh, hell-bent on challenging everything Hinako is. The fog synonymous with Silent Hill fills the tight and narrow alleyways of Ebisagaoka, gradually expanding in scope the further you explore it, with staple locations like schools, homes, and obscured foggy streets making their way into the title. While I believe the game's true horror to be best reflected in its haunting story and themes, I feel the game doesn't quite match up to the later entries on this list, in large part due to the title's combat. While I very much enjoyed the combat here in Silent Hill F, its decidedly heavier emphasis on action, coupled with the second half of the game throwing hordes of enemies at the player at a frequent cadence, spoiled much of the tension for me, as outright avoiding encounters was by far the most effective way to proceed in most situations. The environments here are also decidedly different from previous titles, which to me was a breath of fresh air. Seeing a rural Japanese village overrun with red spider lilies and hearing the occasional static from lingering vintage radios casting some unease, but to me, it was those grimy, filthy, rustic corridors of previous titles that kept me on my toes more. Then we have the otherworld sections of this title. While symbolic of Japanese culture with its abundance of shrines and temples, casting dense layers of incense clouds with haunting yet simultaneously peaceful chimes, fooling you into a sense of false security, these locations don't compare, in my opinion, to the audio-visual cacophony of rusted and corroded metal colliding with brooding sirens and distant thuds of muffled flesh. It is due to this, the decidedly less freaky environments and greater focus on action combat, that put this title slightly behind the scares of some of the other games in the series, yet it ranks within the top 5 for me almost solely due to its heavy narrative and deeply psychological pull, making this easily one of the darker Silent Hill titles to play through, even though the game itself isn't, on the surface, as scary as many of Team Silent's earlier titles. Still, it's a phenomenal game worth checking out, and who knows, maybe its psychological pull may put this much higher on your list, and that is something I definitely would respect.
James, honey, did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway?
Silent Hill 2 is what most fans of the series would consider to be the crown jewel of the franchise. Not only is it one of the scariest games in the franchise, but it is also one of the most somber and heavy survival horror games ever made, dealing with a range of mature topics not commonly explored in video games like suicide, the effects of sexual abuse, bullying, and the suffocating and crippling mental degradation associated with dealing with immense guilt, is part of what separates Silent Hill 2 from most of the other Silent Hill games out there. And series composer Akira Yamaoka and creature and background designer Masahiro Ito delivered big time in creating some of the most beautiful yet haunting soundscapes and imagery ever conceived in this medium. This 2001 PS2 classic expertly details the descent of James Sunderland as he succumbs to the madness of Silent Hill, while he attempts to search for his deceased wife Mary after he mysteriously gets a letter from her. This game pits players against the most gruesome and haunting abominations birthed straight from his deeply suppressed thoughts and desires, culminating in what many people still to this day consider as the scariest, most haunting game ever made. While I may agree with the haunting description there, I don't find the original Silent Hill 2 to be the absolute scariest game in the series, even though it is clearly up there. Speaking strictly from a psychological perspective, however, this, along with its remake, easily takes the cake, but in its gameplay is where I find this game lacking in the scares when compared to Silent Hill 3 and 4. More specifically, in the game just being a bit too easy. Just like its remake, it's easy to have an insane amount of healing items and ammo stockpiled by the mid to late portions of the game. And this, coupled with the relative simplicity of its stiff gameplay, makes most of these encounters lack much urgency. It more than makes up for it in its dilapidated environments, churning out some of the most twisted locations we've ever seen the series take us. But as it stands, Silent Hill 2, along with the rest of Team Silent's games, can all be argued to sit at that top spot for scariest game in the series. I'll never forget coming across Pyramid Head for the first time, staring you down across the apartment hallway separated by bars, his head glowing evilly in the sinister red light. It is one of the greatest survival horror games ever made, and one that has influenced countless numbers of not only horror games, but story-driven titles that have emerged over the years. What just inches past it, in my opinion, could also be seen as a hot take. This one being the black sheep of the franchise, Silent Hill 4: The Room. This game is nightmare fuel. While not taking place in the town of Silent Hill per se, this game instead sees us as Henry Townsend, as we mysteriously find our apartment chained shut with some truly creepy shit going on. Searching around the apartment at first glance gives us a false sense of comfort. That is, until we discover a large hole in the wall of our bathroom. Like any sane person would do, we reach through the hole where we are transported to some twisted areas that lay in the city outside our apartment's walls. It is in these levels, accessible from within your bathroom wall, where the game plays out similarly to previous Silent Hill titles. Levels are largely linear, containing all manner of nasty creatures, and features an interesting combat system where the player charges up melee attacks by holding down the attack button and can dish out some big damage to enemies on longer attack holds. It's a novel approach to combat within Silent Hill that is somewhat similar to the heavy attacks that you can perform in Silent Hill F, and that of Shadow of the Colossus' charged sword plunges, where the greater the charge, the greater the damage. But it is this aspect that makes Silent Hill 4's combat not very exciting nor tense. See, this system can be massively exploited, as you can essentially void any incoming damage by taking advantage of the system's large invisibility window during the wind-up of an attack, as no damage will be sustained during a wind-up attack animation. This means you can essentially attack through any enemy attack in the game without risking any damage in the process, completely getting rid of the tension that would have otherwise have been present during enemy encounters. Even so, the enemy designs here are absolutely some of the very best and most haunting designs found in Silent Hill to date. The wraith-like ghosts here are nothing short of terrifying as their twisted bodies flow through the air, writhing and twitching along the way in an effort to secure their next big snack. Problem is, there is no conventional way to take them out for good. The only way to do it is to use a finite item that will keep them down. Unlike the kerosene flasks that you can use in Resident Evil Remake to light up corpses to prevent Crimson Heads from spawning in their stead, for example, here in Silent Hill 4, you can retrieve that item that pins down the ghost, but the ghost will regain consciousness and continue chasing after you as a result. I kind of love this component to the game, where using this item on ghosts in order to take control of the level and unearth all its secrets, puzzles, and loot is a viable strategy before returning to the ghosts, retrieving the item, and fleeing to your apartment to save your game and sort your stock. Other enemies, like the twin victims, are perhaps the most haunting singular enemy design for me in the series, and their twisted backstory perfectly fits with the murder mystery scenario that takes place in Silent Hill 4: The Room. Speaking of The Room, it is this very room that is especially why I rank this game so high above most of the other games. This apartment, one that for half the game is handled as your one true safe haven, begins to twist and morph in horrifyingly unsettling ways once you reach the halfway point. Your once solid walls start to crumble and decay. Your once sanitary refrigerator instead becomes host to bloodied animal carcasses. Your entire safety net now reduced to a living nightmare. This game can make you think of your own home and living spaces in a completely different way. It's an invasion on everything you once felt comfortable about calling home, reduced to nothing but a living nightmare, and with nowhere to escape, it's up to you to confront that fear for yourself. Better yet, Team Silent made the right decision by making this apartment gameplay control in the first-person perspective, and gives you that much more of an intimate experience with the horrors. With a narrative based on a serial killer whose victims haunt your very apartment and the city surrounding it, this psychological thriller is one that will not escape your mind long after you put it down. Seeing the game's events unfold in real time, from the levels accessed from your bathroom wall, to seeing the effects play out in the scenery by looking out your window and through your apartment door's peephole, this game is one of the most frightening games out there, and one of the most underappreciated Silent Hill games, if not the most underappreciated Silent Hill game yet. This game should absolutely get a remake. I mean, this game has the potential to reach the incredible heights that PT created with its first-person exploration of that corridor. With this game setting a precedent for what PT eventually became, Silent Hill 4: The Room would be incredible to see replicated in a remake in the coming years. Sound off in the comments if you think this game should get a remake, now that Silent Hill 1 is the next game to receive the glow-up. Alright, we are at the final two games here, and just like all of Team Silent's games, you can make compelling arguments as to why each of them should be the scariest game of all time. As for me, the distinction for the second scariest Silent Hill game yet just barely goes to Silent Hill 3. Serving more or less as a direct sequel to Silent Hill 1, Silent Hill 3 is absolutely haunting throughout the entire game. From start to finish, you, the player, along with protagonist Heather Mason, are, in my opinion, in for easily the most visually disturbing and atmospheric Silent Hill game prior to the Silent Hill 2 remake. And with Silent Hills 1, 2, and 4 already being exceptionally scary games, Silent Hill 3's scares and accomplishments are second to none. The monsters and their designs are perhaps the series' most brutal and twisted ones yet, and while the nurse enemy makes a comeback here in Silent Hill 3, their design is significantly altered to portray what these figures represent to Heather, rather than their over-sexualized counterpart in Silent Hill 2 for James. The complete bleakness you get with the otherworld sections in Silent Hill 3 provides a decidedly more hellish landscape for the title, which is congruent for Silent Hill 3's return to more of the cultic side of the town of Silent Hill, as this game serves as a direct sequel to Silent Hill 1. Outside of the otherworld sections, just exploring around the game's many labyrinthine areas make for an unsettling time, as everything is so rusted over and decrepit that it makes you want to get a tetanus shot from all the filth surrounding you. While the game's enemies are decidedly more aggressive than the encounters in Silent Hills 1 and 2, the weapons are handled more to my liking here in Silent Hill 3, with its wide assortment of melee weapons all serving their roles. Each weapon you get doesn't render the previous ones obsolete, as they all serve their role here in their utility, and I greatly appreciate that element added to Silent Hill 3. The encounters feel more tense when you need to strategically use certain weapons when faced against certain threats. With the pipe being long and great at stunning enemies, this weapon may be the option for you if you want to put some distance between you and your foe, but if you'd like to try to quickly dispose of them, substituting the pipe for something like the katana may be more effective in that it deals out more damage, but at the expense of it having shorter range. The mace deals massive damage at the cost of a slow attack speed, but the stun gun may be your best option if you just want to temporarily immobilize your target so that you can get your bearings and reassess. The enhancements made to particularly the melee systems do a great job at getting you relaxed and comfortable before inundating you with its intense dread and atmosphere. The scariest moments for me were undoubtedly the mirror room, seeing yourself reflected in a demonic, deadly way before seeing your entire room get taken over by hostile, bloody decay, pitting you against the clock to find a way out alive. The other big mention would also have to be the mannequin room here, with the jump scare taking place when you are already tense with navigating through this creepy storage room. Upon exploring the room, hearing that nearby shriek only to find that mannequin's head now severed, leaving a bloody mess, elevates the tension, giving you the sense that literally no area in Silent Hill 3 is truly safe. Silent Hill 3 for me best encapsulates this sense of dread and anxiety around every corner that Silent Hill 4 nearly got perfected, and its improvements with the combat, the awesome story and characters and their relationship to the very first Silent Hill game, and its sharper presentation over the previous installment culminate in what I believe was the scariest Silent Hill game ever made. Until Silent Hill 2 Remake came out, that is. Yeah, I can already imagine some of the old school Silent Hill 2 players out there claiming I'm out of my mind for thinking its remake is scarier than the original game, and this is why this video pertains to my own list. So if you disagree with it, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comments, but man oh man. Bloober Team, along with the return of composer Akira Yamaoka and creature and background designer Masahiro Ito, have knocked this one out of the park, turning its back on the mostly fixed camera angles of the original game and instead providing players with an over-the-shoulder third-person perspective was a highly contentious decision for Konami and Bloober Team here in this remake, and I get why. The original's camera was explicitly there to guide you through the experience as the developers intended you to view the game, providing dramatic angles for which to view your surroundings and the enemies on screen, while also giving you the sense of disorientation and lack of control, something that Silent Hill is known for. However, from my experience, like what Resident Evil 2 Remake did for Resident Evil 2, and just as this remake of Silent Hill 2 does for its PS2 original, the switch to a fully operational camera allows you to truly get immersed in all the game's environments. The camera's general closeness to James in the remake gives you that much more of a closer relationship to all the nasty and haunting stuff he encounters throughout the game. Every gnarly enemy coming your way, every hulking sword strike from Pyramid Head, every blow from an enemy attack that seems to knock the wind out of James is something that can more closely be felt in the remake, and I guess that's really where I think this remake succeeds, in just getting you closer to that thick, pervasive atmosphere, its disturbing enemies and environments, and that immersive storytelling that the original was known for. Staring down the bubblehead nurses directly in front of you, seeing their heads twist and gyrate uncontrollably towards you, further reinforces the haunting connection these enemies have to the psyche of James, and the general scariness and unsettling nature of the enemy designs just hit a bit harder in the remake. The graphical enhancements to the environments are one of the stars of the show here, with so much detail permeating throughout the game. All the environments retain that claustrophobic element that was executed so well in the original title, now expanded and reworked in ways that make a playthrough of this remake feel refreshing and just as haunting as the original title. It's a game that doesn't try to rewrite the original game. Rather, it feels more like what Resident Evil 4 Remake was to Resident Evil 4. A mostly incredibly faithful remake that takes strides at embellishing the experience in ways that both entices older players to give this new iteration a try, while also appealing to players who have never tried a Silent Hill game before. Going back and playing the original game doesn't make that game any less good, or for this video's purpose, scary. While I believe the general bleakness and atmosphere in the remake is better reinforced due to the graphical leap and the reworking of the camera, these two versions of the game both stand as truly some of the best survival horror games ever made, and you can make that argument for pretty much all of Team Silent's games here. In the case of Bloober Team, they clearly understood the assignment and kept what we loved about the original game's story intact. And while not everyone likes some of the remake's character models, the acting and portrayal of these characters were done incredibly well here. The visceral nature of the combat here is brutal as hell, with every hit sounding appropriately nasty, with sounds of blunt objects hitting flesh appropriately sounding as you would think a steel pipe hitting flesh would, and it doesn't diminish the everyman nature of James Sunderland. He's still every bit as clunky here, but you just get so much more of a response from the gameplay, with each impact from a blunt weapon, his stomp, and gunshot bringing the horrifying monstrosity of James' mind ever closer to you, the player. This game is a masterclass in perfectly replicating the dread we got from the original title, now brought to modern hardware. And say what you want about the other aspects of Silent Hill 2 Remake, but to me, the tension, atmosphere, dread, and generally unsettling nature of this remake marks the pinnacle of scares for what Silent Hill currently has on offer. Whether or not you agree with this game's placement here, most of us can agree that Silent Hill 2 is still a masterclass in generating tension and unease in the player, with its deeply emotional story backing it all up. As for the remake, it was a revisit to Silent Hill many of us were skeptical about over the years and months leading up to its release. But now, we can all rest assured that not only did this game deliver, but it is generating an interest in Silent Hill that we have not seen in quite some time, and that is something we can all celebrate. From its older titles to some of the newer games, there are some good scares to be found in Silent Hill, so share with me your own rankings in the comments below. With another remake on the way and with Silent Hill Townfall likely coming relatively soon, it's safe to say that the king of psychological horror video games is here to stay. But if you are interested in the scariest games Resident Evil has going on for it, consult this video over here as we go over every single game in that series, spin-offs included, ranking them from least scary to the absolute scariest. That's all I got for you here. Thank you as always for making it this far, and I will be seeing you all real soon in the next one.